Mo3’s mother broke down in tears inside a Dallas courtroom, crying in front of everyone as years of heartbreak finally poured out where nobody could look away. Across the room sat Yella Beezy, the man she believes played a role in the tragedy that changed her family's life forever. According to people who were there, he looked in her direction and laughed. There was no visible sign of regret, no hesitation, just a reaction that quickly became one of the most talked about moments connected to this case. That single moment sparked even more debate and had people looking at everything through a different lens. Today, we're breaking down the entire story, from Mo3’s rise in Dallas, to Yella Beezy's own climb in the rap game, to the rivalry that became one of the most talked about feuds in Texas hip-hop, and finally, the courtroom moments that have everyone talking. There's a lot to unpack, and every chapter adds another piece to the bigger picture. It all starts with Melvin Abdul Noble Jr., better known as Mo3, who was born in McKinney, Texas, in 1992. He grew up on the north side of Dallas, where making it out wasn't easy, and opportunities were hard to come by for many young people. Dallas had talent everywhere, but the city's rap scene wasn't getting much attention from the music industry. If you wanted the world to notice you, you had to stand out in a major way. Mo3 believed he could do exactly that. He poured everything into his music and often described himself in interviews as someone who had left a difficult lifestyle behind to chase a different future. For him, writing songs wasn't just about making records. It was a chance to tell his story, express real emotions, and build a path away from a life that could have ended very differently. When his debut mixtape, Shottas, dropped in 2014, listeners immediately noticed something different. Mo3 wasn't telling made-up stories or trying to impress people with fake images. His music reflected experiences, emotions, loss, and the pressure of growing up in an environment where every decision carried serious consequences. That honesty connected with people and quickly separated him from many other artists coming out of Dallas. Mo3 built his fanbase the hard way, one mixtape at a time and one performance at a time. There were no shortcuts. Every release brought in more listeners, and every show made his name even bigger. Along the way, he formed a connection with Boozy Badazz, one of the artists he had looked up to for years. That relationship helped create new opportunities and pushed his career to another level. His 2015 project, Shottas Reloaded, reached number 14 on Billboard's Rap Albums chart and climbed to number 2 on the Heat Seekers chart. Then, his next project, For Indictments, went even further by taking the top spot on the Heat Seekers chart. When Shottas 3.0 dropped in 2018, Mo3 had a breakout record with Everybody. The track mixed emotional storytelling with melodies that connected with listeners far beyond Dallas. People related to it because it felt honest and personal instead of forced. His momentum kept growing, and Complex's Pigeons and Planes even recognized him as the most streamed Dallas rapper on Spotify at the time. That wasn't just another headline. It showed that the city had fully embraced one of its own, and that his music was reaching audiences across the country. In February 2020, Mo3 and Boozy teamed up for the collaborative mixtape Badazz Mo3, which debuted at number 136 on the Billboard 200. His career looked like it was heading toward a major breakthrough. He was recording new music, building bigger opportunities, and putting together what many believed would be his biggest chapter yet. Then everything changed on November 11th, 2020. Mo3 was only 28 years old and the father of 3 children. Reports say he was on the phone with his manager when events unfolded that shocked fans across the country. His story took a heartbreaking turn, and the music world was left searching for answers. Now let's look at the other side of this story. Marquise DeAndre Conway, better known as Yella Beezy, was born in Dallas in October 1991. He grew up in Oak Cliff, facing many of the same challenges that shaped so many young people in the area. Like Mo3, he spent years trying to build something bigger than the environment around him. Success didn't happen overnight. It came after years of grinding and refusing to give up. Yella Beezy started releasing mixtapes while he was still a teenager, earning respect throughout Dallas little by little. His 2016 debut project, Lightwork, helped establish his name across the region. Then everything changed in 2017 when That's On Me caught fire. The song blended trap sounds with a Texas style that made it stand out, giving it a unique feel that listeners couldn't ignore. The record spread fast because people genuinely connected with it. It wasn't built on hype alone. It grew through word of mouth and loyal fans until it climbed to number 56 on the Billboard Hot 100. Suddenly, Yella Beezy wasn't just another Dallas rapper. He had become one of the hottest new names in hip-hop. The remix only made things bigger, bringing together major artists like 2 Chainz, T.I., Rich the Kid, Jeezy, Boozy Badazz, and Trap Boy Freddy, giving the song even more national attention. Yella Beezy's career kept climbing fast. His 2018 album, Ain't No Goin' Back, landed in the upper half of the Billboard 200, showing he was becoming a major force in hip-hop. Before the decade ended, his music had racked up more than 1 billion streams across different platforms. He even joined Beyonce and Jay-Z on the On the Run 2 tour, putting him in front of huge crowds. On top of that, he worked with artists like Pharrell, Chris Brown, Gucci Mane, and Quavo. In just a few years, Yella Beezy had gone from a respected Dallas rapper to one of the South's biggest commercial success stories. At the same time, another Dallas star was making major moves. Mo3 and Yella Beezy were both rising in the same city, coming from similar backgrounds and chasing the same spotlight. According to prosecutors, that close connection eventually became part of the conflict they now describe in court. Publicly, the timeline of the reported feud is often traced back to around 2017, although some people believe the issues may have started even earlier. What is well documented is that as both artists became more successful, signs of tension started showing. Mo3 openly shared his frustrations during interviews, on social media, and through his music. One incident he frequently discussed involved a major 2019 concert at the Star in Frisco, featuring Yella Beezy, Future, and Juice WRLD. Mo3 claimed he arrived at the venue, but was arrested on an outstanding warrant. He publicly said he believed that people connected to Yella Beezy's camp played a role in setting that situation up. Yella Beezy publicly denied those allegations. Mo3 also claimed that people tied to Yella Beezy were trying to slow his career behind the scenes by limiting his opportunities and making it harder for him to reach bigger stages. Those claims became part of the public conversation, even though they were never established as fact in court. Whether those accusations reflected reality, misunderstanding, or Mo3's personal belief that he was being targeted, they became a major part of the story surrounding both artists. Here's what made everything even more confusing. At different times, both Mo3 and Yella Beezy publicly denied having an active feud. While rumors continued to spread throughout Dallas and online, both men gave interviews suggesting there wasn't ongoing beef between them. That created a huge gap between what fans and local gossip were saying and what the artists themselves were saying in public. It wasn't until after Mo3's death that investigators began laying out a very different version of events. Prosecutors now argued that those public denials did not reflect what was happening behind the scenes. Their case alleges that the conflict had become far more serious than many people realized and eventually reached a tragic ending. Those allegations are now part of the legal proceedings and remain subject to the court process. Outside the courtroom, though, rumors had been spreading for years. Long before any arrests or indictments, stories circulated throughout parts of Dallas claiming that someone had offered money to target Mo3. Those claims were widely discussed in local conversations and across social media, but they remained rumors at the time and were not backed by public court findings. After Mo3's death, those rumors spread even further, with many people pointing back to earlier speculation. When the indictment was announced in March 2025, reactions were split. Some people were shocked, while others said they had been expecting legal action for a long time. Still, it's important to separate public speculation from what can actually be proven. As the case moved into the courtroom, the focus shifted away from rumors and toward the evidence, testimony, and legal arguments presented before the court. That is where the next chapter of this story begins. November 11th, 2020 began like any other day in Dallas, but before the afternoon was over, everything had changed. Mo3 was driving north on Interstate 35E near Clarendon Drive, just south of the Dallas Zoo. According to reports, he was on his way to what his manager believed was a video shoot. Then, at around 11:55 a.m., a black Chevrolet Camaro pulled up beside his vehicle, setting off a chain of events that would shock the city. Investigators say a masked gunman stepped out of the Camaro. Realizing the danger, Mo3 got out of his own vehicle and ran down the busy freeway, desperately trying to escape. Traffic surrounded the scene as he sprinted southbound with the shooter chasing behind him. Prosecutors allege the gunman caught up and fired multiple shots, striking Mo3 several times, including a fatal gunshot wound. Emergency responders rushed him to a nearby hospital, but he later died from his injuries. He was only 28 years old. Surveillance cameras captured parts of the attack, and when Dallas police released the footage, it quickly spread across the internet. The video left many people stunned and raised immediate questions about what had happened. Investigators believed the circumstances pointed to a planned attack rather than a random act of violence. According to authorities, someone appeared to know where Mo3 would be that day, with a vehicle and a suspected shooter allegedly in position before everything unfolded. The investigation moved quickly. In February 2021, Keon Dontrell White was indicted in connection with Mo3's killing. A few months later, in April, Devin Maurice Brown was also charged as part of the case. Prosecutors identified both men as being connected to the shooting. White later pleaded guilty to federal firearm charges related to the incident and is serving a federal prison sentence, while also continuing to face separate state charges connected to the case. For several years, investigators had not publicly charged the person they believed was behind the alleged payment connected to the killing. That changed in March 2025, when a Dallas County grand jury indicted Marquise Conway, known professionally as Yella Beezy, on a charge of capital murder while remuneration. Under Texas law, that charge alleges that a killing was carried out in exchange for payment or the promise of payment. It is important to note that these are allegations made by prosecutors, and Yella Beezy has the right to contest them in court. Authorities arrested Conway on March 20th, 2025, and booked him into the Dallas County Jail. His bond was initially set at $2 million, before later being reduced to $750,000. After posting bond, he was released under strict conditions, including house arrest and electronic monitoring, where he has remained as the legal process continues to unfold. He pleaded not guilty. His name was Yella Beezy. He was 33 years old, and he was now facing a case that could potentially change the rest of his life. If convicted, he could face a sentence that keeps him in a Texas prison for decades or longer. Now, let's break down what prosecutors are bringing forward in this case, because their argument goes far beyond rumors or conversations happening online. The state is building a case around multiple pieces of evidence, and each part is meant to support their theory of what happened behind the scenes. One major area prosecutors are focusing on is money. According to reports about the indictment and court filings, investigators allege that Conway withdrew $40,000 in cash within days of Mo3's death. Prosecutors say they plan to use that financial information as part of their argument that money was allegedly involved between Conway and Keon White. Banking records from JP Chase were subpoenaed as part of pretrial proceedings connected to the case. Prosecutors say those records could help establish a timeline and provide additional context for their claims. Then, there is the music. In a February 2026 filing involving potential evidence, Dallas County prosecutors listed several Conway songs they want considered during trial. Keep It in the Streets, On Ya Head, Hitters, and Take 3. The prosecution argues that the lyrics are more than just creative expression and believes certain lines connect to themes of paying for violence or making threats. However, the defense has the opportunity to challenge how that material is used and what meaning should be taken from the songs. During a pretrial hearing, Detective Eric Barnes discussed specific lyrics from those tracks and testified that prosecutors believe some of the language supports their murder-for-hire theory. The state argues that certain references in the music match the allegations they are presenting in court, while the meaning of those lyrics will ultimately be debated through the legal process. Barnes also testified that Keon White, who prosecutors identify as the alleged shooter, appeared on stage with Conway at a concert before Mo3's death. Prosecutors argue that connection shows White had a relationship with Conway and access to him before the shooting. The defense will have the chance to challenge that interpretation and question how much weight that connection should carry. Prosecutors have also alleged that two songs, Take 3 and Gassed Up, were sent by Conway to a co-defendant through text messages on the day Mo3 was killed. The state says those messages are another piece of the timeline they are trying to present to the jury as they build their case. If prosecutors' claims are proven, they argue those messages could represent more than just an artist sharing music with someone close to him. They say the digital trail could become an important part of their argument, showing a possible connection between the defendant and the alleged crime timeline. But the case is not only about money, messages, or music. Prosecutors also say they plan to present a larger picture of Conway's background. In court filings, the state has referenced alleged connections to the Crips and an affiliated group known as Get Rich Cartel. Prosecutors also plan to discuss parts of his past legal history, including weapons-related allegations, drug-related cases, and an assault-related unverified civil case from 2024. That civil case involved Mo3’s manager, Brandon Rainwater, who accused Conway of assault outside a Dallas nightclub in January 2020. A jury later ruled in Rainwater's favor in that civil matter. Some previous criminal cases involving Conway ended with reduced outcomes or dismissals, but prosecutors argue the history they plan to present helps support their view of a pattern they believe is relevant to the case. The state has also discussed bringing up the shooting involving Boozy Badazz as part of the broader context. After Mo3’s death in November 2020, Boozy traveled to Dallas to pay his respects. He was later shot in the leg while in the city. Prosecutors allege that incident was connected to the same larger conflict they say surrounded Mo3’s death. The defense is expected to challenge that connection and argue about how much relevance it should have in court. Now this is where the legal battle gets even more intense. Yella Beezy's defense team has pushed back strongly against the prosecution's strategy. His attorneys, Toby Shook, John Guccio III, and Michael Mola, have filed multiple pretrial motions challenging different parts of the state's evidence and arguments. One of the biggest fights before trial has centered around the use of rap lyrics as evidence. Defense attorneys filed a motion asking the court to prevent certain songs from being shown to jurors. They also brought in an academic expert to explain why they believe rap lyrics can easily be misunderstood when taken outside of their artistic and cultural context. Dr. Eric Nielsen, a University of Richmond professor who has studied the use of rap lyrics in criminal cases, testified during a pretrial hearing on July 17, 2026. He argued that jurors who are unfamiliar with hip-hop culture could be at risk of interpreting creative expression as a direct confession rather than understanding the style, storytelling, and language behind the music. Dr. Nielsen compared rappers to professional wrestlers, explaining that both often create larger-than-life characters built around entertainment, emotion, and performance. A wrestler plays a role inside a scripted world, and Nielsen argued that artists can also use exaggerated personas as part of their music. His point was that people generally understand the difference between a performer and the person behind the character. He argued that the same distinction should apply to Yella Beezy and the persona connected to his music. Nielsen told the court that confusing an artist's lyrics with real-life actions could create an unfair situation for a defendant. He pointed to research showing that people often interpret rap lyrics as more literal and threatening compared to the exact same words presented in another musical style, such as country music. The lyrics were unchanged, but the reaction from listeners was different. The defense argues that this difference in perception matters in a case where the stakes are extremely high. Defense attorneys are hoping the court considers those arguments before allowing the jury to hear the music-related evidence. They believe the context behind hip-hop, storytelling, and artistic expression is important when deciding what meaning should be taken from lyrics. The defense has also challenged the amount of evidence involved in the case. Attorneys argued that prosecutors provided more than 16 terabytes of discovery material, a massive amount of information that they say includes material unrelated to Conway specifically. They have also pushed for more information about witnesses and possible sources of testimony. The legal team has requested details about any agreements, benefits, or immunity arrangements given to cooperating witnesses. Under rules connected to Brady and Gilio, prosecutors are required to disclose certain information that could impact a witness's credibility. Conway's attorneys say they want every detail examined carefully and are building their challenges step by step before trial. From the beginning, Conway has denied any involvement in Mo3’s death. His defense team argues that prosecutors are relying too heavily on interpretations of rap lyrics and financial information instead of evidence that proves guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. They maintain that the case must be judged on facts presented in court, not assumptions or public opinions. Now let's look at the courtroom moment that spread across the internet, because there is a major difference between online reactions and what can actually be confirmed through court records. The case activity in early 2026 focused mainly on pretrial hearings leading up to the scheduled February 2nd trial date. Mo3’s mother, Nicole Williams, remained a visible presence during the proceedings. After Yella Beezy's arrest in March 2025, she shared a short message on Facebook that read, "Justice for my baby." Her attendance at the hearings showed the continued emotional impact the case has had on Mo3’s family as they wait for the legal process to move forward. The emotion Nicole Williams carried into that courtroom was impossible to ignore. She had already lived through the loss of her son and spent years waiting to see what would happen next in the investigation. Sitting inside a courtroom with the person prosecutors accuse of being connected to her son's death would be an incredibly painful experience for any parent. It was a moment filled with grief, anger, and years of unanswered questions. But then the internet took the story in another direction. A claim began spreading across reaction channels and social media that Yella Beezy sat in court and laughed while Nicole Williams was emotional. That allegation quickly became the headline people focused on, leading to countless comments, reposts, and strong opinions about his character. However, based on available reporting, court records, and verified accounts of the proceedings, there is no confirmed evidence showing that this happened. What the public record does show is that Yella Beezy was not present during a key pretrial hearing on January 16, 2026. Reports stated that his mother had passed away earlier that week, and his legal team informed the court about the situation. During that time, Conway shared memories of his mother online, posting multiple slides on Instagram and describing her as his mother, his sister, his best friend, and his world. He wrote about the pain of losing her and said he would never wish that kind of heartbreak on anyone. Those posts showed someone publicly grieving a major personal loss. The viral claim about a courtroom reaction created a powerful narrative online, but the documented timeline tells a different story. He was not sitting in that courtroom during that hearing. This situation highlights how quickly emotions and assumptions can spread online. Many people who are following the case have strong feelings about the accusations against Yella Beezy, and the pain experienced by Mo3’s family is very real. At the same time, court cases are decided by evidence, testimony, and legal arguments, not by viral moments that cannot be verified. The internet often moves faster than the facts. A rumor can become a headline within minutes, but a courtroom requires something much more specific: proof. That difference has become one of the biggest themes surrounding this case as both sides prepare for trial. Now let's look at the legal stakes moving forward into August 24, 2026. The charge of capital murder, while remuneration in Texas alleges that a killing happened because of payment or the promise of payment. If a defendant is convicted under this charge, prosecutors can seek a sentence of life in prison without parole or pursue the death penalty during the punishment phase. If Yella Beezy is convicted, the punishment phase could become one of the most serious parts of the entire case. The question would no longer only be about prison time. It could become a question of whether he spends the rest of his life behind bars or faces the possibility of the death penalty. So the question many people are asking is simple: does Yella Beezy actually have a chance of winning this case? The answer depends on how the jury views the evidence, because both sides have major arguments they will bring into court. This is not a case that will likely be decided by one single piece of information. The prosecution's evidence carries serious weight. They are expected to focus on the alleged $40,000 cash withdrawal after Mo3’s death, the text messages prosecutors say were connected to the timeline, and the relationship between Conway and Keon White, who prosecutors identify as the alleged shooter. Each piece is something the state believes helps connect the larger picture they are presenting. But strong evidence does not automatically mean a guaranteed conviction. The defense has several areas where they can challenge the state's case. One of the biggest battles remains the use of rap lyrics. If the judge limits or blocks certain songs from being shown to jurors, prosecutors could lose a major part of the story they want to tell about Conway's alleged mindset and intentions. Without that music evidence, the case could rely more heavily on financial records, digital evidence, and testimony from witnesses connected to the investigation. That is where the defense believes it can create questions. Attorneys have been pushing for details about any agreements, benefits, or promises made to cooperating witnesses because they want the jury to examine whether those witnesses are fully reliable. In a criminal trial, the defense does not have to prove exactly what happened. The burden remains on prosecutors to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. If the defense can create enough uncertainty among jurors, that could become a major factor in the outcome. Given the length of the investigation, the complexity of the evidence, and the lack of a public confession, Conway's legal team believes there are arguments they can present, but having a possible path to victory and actually winning are two very different things. The final decision will come down to the evidence presented in court and how the jury interprets it. Beyond the courtroom, this case has left a major impact on Dallas hip-hop and the people closest to Mo3. Since the shooting on November 11, 2020, the city has continued to feel the loss. Mo3 represented more than just a successful rapper. To many fans, he represented the possibility of someone from Dallas rising from difficult circumstances and earning national attention through music. After his death, his legacy continued growing. His posthumous album Shottas 4 EVA was released in 2021, followed by the 2024 Project Legend. His music has continued collecting gold and platinum certifications, with streams still increasing years later. His influence remains visible throughout the culture he helped represent. Behind the music, though, there is a family still dealing with the loss. Mo3's children are growing up without their father, and his mother, Nicole Williams, has had to experience every development in the case while while carrying a loss that never truly goes away. For her, and many others close to him, this case is not just a headline, it is connected to a life that was taken too soon. Meanwhile, Yella Beezy's career has remained uncertain since his arrest, with his future depending heavily on how this legal battle unfolds. Since his arrest, Yella Beezy's life has changed dramatically. He has remained under house arrest with an ankle monitor and has only been allowed limited time outside his home, including scheduled hours to work on music. In September 2025, he released a single titled "Blame It On Me," showing that he has continued creating despite the legal situation surrounding him. His Spotify audience remains strong, with hundreds of thousands of monthly listeners still following his music. The songs kept coming, but his freedom became restricted, and the outcome of the trial could determine what happens next in his career. The Dallas hip-hop community has watched this entire situation unfold with mixed emotions. Many people grew up listening to both Mo3 and Yella Beezy. Some fans still have songs from both artists in their playlists. They came from the same city, represented the same culture, and followed similar paths towards success. Now, that same community is forced to confront the possibility that a reported conflict between two rising artists ended with one person losing his life and another facing one of the most serious criminal charges possible. For years, both artists publicly pushed back against the idea that their conflict was as serious as rumors suggested. Looking back now, those statements are viewed differently by many people because of everything that happened afterward. But separating what was publicly said, what was rumored, and what can be proven in court remains one of the biggest challenges in this case. Here's where things get complicated. The internet moved extremely fast with this story. A headline about Mo3's mother being emotional and Yella Beezy allegedly laughing spread quickly because it created a powerful reaction. People shared it, discussed it, and formed opinions. But when that moment is compared with the documented court record, the details do not match the viral version. Available records indicate that Yella Beezy was not present at the specific hearing where that claim was attached. Instead, reports show he was dealing with the loss of his own mother during that time. The viral story was built around a real case and real emotions, but the specific claim was not supported by verified evidence. What cannot be debated is that the legal case itself is real. The capital murder charge exists. The prosecution's allegations involving financial records, digital evidence, and music are part of the court proceedings. Keon White, whom prosecutors identify as the alleged shooter, has faced federal charges connected to the incident. The trial will ultimately come down to evidence presented inside the courtroom. Nicole Williams' grief is real. Her search for answers since November 2020 is real. The loss experienced by Mo3's family and supporters is something that cannot be measured by headlines or social media posts. In the end, the decision will belong to a Dallas County jury. 12 jurors will have to determine whether prosecutors have proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Marquise Conway was involved in Mo3's death through the charges brought against him. The verdict will not be based on internet rumors, public opinion, or lyrics alone. It will come down to what the evidence shows in court. Whether the evidence reaches the legal standard required for a conviction is the only thing that matters inside that courtroom. After everything that has happened since November 11th, 2020, this case has reached the moment where facts, testimony, and evidence will decide what comes next. No matter where someone stands on the accusations against Yella Beezy, one thing remains clear. Mo3's family has lived through years of pain, questions, and public attention. Nicole Williams deserved for the focus to remain on her son, the artist he became, the impact he made, and the 3 children he left behind. His music continues to be heard years later, keeping his legacy alive with fans around the world. When Nicole Williams walked into that courtroom, she carried the memory of her son and the weight of everything that came after his death. The story should never be reduced to viral clips or unverified claims. At the center of it all is a family still searching for answers and a legal process that must now determine the truth. The trial is scheduled to begin August 24th, and the next chapter will happen inside the courtroom, where evidence, not rumors, will take center stage. So what do you think happens when this case reaches the jury? Will the prosecution prove its case, or will the defense create enough doubt? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let us know where you stand. If you want more deep dives into the biggest cases, controversies, and stories shaping hip-hop culture, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with others, and stay tuned for more updates.